Let's take a look now at our lesson planning process guide at step 3. Make decisions regarding how you will facilitate the lesson. Bill, will you walk us through those guiding questions to make sure that we have that in mind as we plan through the next step?
What parts of the lesson will be done as a whole group, small group, in pairs, or independently? Where would students benefit from working together? What collaborative structure will I use? What facilitation techniques might I use? What questions will I ask to stimulate student thinking and interaction? When will I ask them? Where might students struggle? How will I anticipate and pre-plan for how I will respond when students struggle or demonstrate mastery?
So this is really the meat of your lesson, the big main body of your lesson. What are some ideas that you have to establish some things with some of the main goals for your lesson with your students?
Well, I think we need to have them bring it into real life, because the abstract of just knowing, I think when they say the 21st century learner, they need to be able to, look at the world differently. And then I was looking through our Common Core, flip chart here, and there's a couple activities that I think might lend itself to our social goal as well as our academic goal. Because one has movement involved, which would get them up and moving with the different, learning styles. And then the other one is, it could go along with, if we choose some real world pictures, they can identify the vocabulary onto those real world pictures. And we could use the smart board, to have them be able to identify on, on the smart board as well.
Christine, elaborate on that. How would they use their whiteboards in conjunction to the pictures?
They could look at the photo and using your whiteboard identify and write the vocabulary words.
As to what they see in the photo,
what they see in the photo.
And then we can have them go up and demonstrate and draw actually on the smart
Oh,
board what
yeah.
they saw.
Some kid, yeah.
They can trace it.
Because they're going to see different things.
Yeah.
So that'll be cool.
And then they can tell us what they found, describe to us.
And use that, justifying and clarifying, so they can say, well, here's the line segment, it has 1 point, the 2 points, and bring that
identify it with the
vocabulary.
correct vocabulary word.
Alright guys, so now we're on step 4, which is deciding how students will share and reflect on their work. What questions will I ask my students about what they learned? What questions will I ask my students about how they work together? And what will I do with this information? So Kristen, I know you had talked about there was like a movement activity in there or something. Is that maybe something we could use for a summary?
Yeah, here, it goes initially through, like, the students draw and label points, which we have them doing initially with the photos and the showdown and on their whiteboards. And then it goes through having the students be able to get up and move using gestures and body motion. A Simon Says game, going through the different vocabulary words, and they have to think of how would that look using their arms or legs or head or whatever. So they have to then be creative and think about what would look like our vocabulary to go with showing their summarization activity through body movements, and so showing what they learned and having to be quick on their feet in their response to show if they really internalized it.
Did
So
they grasp it or not? So I think that would be a really cool summary because it gets them up, it's engaging. We can kind of see, hey, they got it or they didn't. So maybe that's something we can put in here for step 4.
Now that we've written the entire lesson with the lesson step, teacher's actions, and intended student actions, we really want to take a look at difficulties that the students may have in any step and what the teacher is going to do if the difficulty is observed. So let's take a look through the lesson and see where we might find some difficulties the students might have.
Well, some students might struggle to identify vocabulary.
What step do you see that in, Christine?
Step 3.
Is everybody there? So what can be done if the students struggle to identify the vocabulary when they're looking at the projected photos?
I think maybe here the teacher could stand next to them and kind of point to the picture. Maybe look over
Right.
here in this area of the window, or look at the postman, or
Give them a specific area to
as
look at.
opposed to the whole photo where they might be overwhelmed. And then I think maybe if that doesn't help, then maybe actually going to the board
And
giving
modeling.
them that specific area. Now look right here, what do you see? So I think we'd still let it be scaffold, you know, let's try from here, but then if that's still not working, now I'm gonna go and actually, here's the area, I want you to look directly here. What do you see?
Bill, you have a self-contained academic classroom. Do you think that's going to work out okay with your students also?
I think so. The next step I would go to actually going up and actually tracing the angle or parallel lines, whatever it happened to be.
All right, great. Does that work for everybody? You think
Yeah.
that'll work out for all your
Yeah, I
classes?
think it would. Yep.
Okay, let's go ahead and get that captured.
And that would really go down 4, 5, 6. Now, when we get to 7, I'm kind of concerned with this. We're going to have the students draw examples of real world by giving them, say, a ray. And then they need to think about what's around the school and draw that. Some students might not be able to connect those vocabulary words to real world, I messed that up. Real world objects around the school. So we might have to point an area. of the
Teachers can point to a
classroom out.
specific area.
Yeah, same thing like last time, just get really specific, because I agree, I have some kids that will just be sitting there not doing anything, because they won't understand, like, around the school, and they can't think, so if we
So
walked
in the
over to
room.
like a
In the
bookshelf
room.
or something.
In their
like,
classroom.
Let's just look at this bookshelf, what can
do
you
you
find within that?
Right.
So if we make it specific.
There's so much within the room. Some of them are going to go into the playground in their mind, but there's so
Yeah,
much
some
within the
are.
room we could point out to.
Right.
Narrow the focus.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and we'll get that captured. All right, and what I see that you wrote is, let's take a look around the room and see if you can find something within the room, and then moving it down to a specific area, and then narrowing the focus further and further. Okay, great. Now that we've finished looking at the lesson planning outline, we've worked on all the teacher actions, intended student actions, difficulty the students might have in the step, and what the teacher is going to do if the difficulties are observed. We took a look at the data collection instrument. You decided to collect both academic and social behavior on the same form. So the behaviors that you said would indicate engagement for your learning goal for these standards, both social and academic, were that they were looking at their own whiteboard, they were using a correct response, writing a correct response, and they had correct justification on the board when they went up to the whiteboard to show it on the picture. Behaviors that indicated lack of engagement were just opposite of that. They were not looking at their own board, so that meant that they were looking on someone else's, or they weren't responding at all, they had an incorrect response, or they had an incorrect justification when they went up to the picture on the whiteboard. Are there any additions or changes that you'd like to make to the data collection form or to the lesson plan? Take a moment to look through that before we print that out. Okay, we finished up our data collection instrument, and something that we need to consider is the interval at which we're going to collect the tally marks and how many tally marks for each piece. So we know that some people are going to have 2 students, some people will have 4 students. So let's talk about how those tally marks will be collected. So for the students looking at their own board, so Sarah is going to have 2 children that she is responsible for collecting data on. She will have 2 tally marks for each one of the areas. There may be 1 tally mark in the indicating engagement and 1 in the lack of engagement,
Right.
depending on. Okay. Bill, you have 4 children, Bill, you're teaching. It's Kristen that has 4 children that you'll be watching, and so you'll have at least 4
Total of 4.
in each, a total of 4. So is everybody comfortable with the data collection instrument? Do you have any questions at all?
No?
So Bill, you're going to be teaching the class the lesson that we all have designed together, and Christine is going to be your gifted inclusion classroom that's taught. So now that we have that lens to focus on the lesson through, let's take a look at it through that gifted inclusion kind of lens and see what modifications might still need to be made.
After looking at the lesson plan, it looks like it would be a perfect fit for my gifted inclusion class.
And yeah, and I'm glad that we chose, you know, your class now to look at this, because if mine was chosen, I know that I would definitely have to go back and do more, focus more on the vocabulary at the beginning, and then getting into the actual lesson, not just pointing at the words. I would actually have to go back through, I think, and give the definitions again, and maybe a quick visual of what the geometric shape looks like, and then move into our activity.
Yeah, and with mine, it would be the vocabulary also, but I think the timing throughout would have changed. We would have had increased more time throughout the whole session.
Excellent points. All right, well then if we are all set with the lesson, there are no other changes that you want to make, the data collection form looks good to the team?
Yep.
Let's take a look at our research lesson protocol, and you have that in front of you as well on your clipboards. And we want to remember when Bill goes in, Bill, you're going to maintain that lesson integrity, do the best you can to stick with the script. And we know that's a difficult thing to do, so you're going to do your best with that and take positions around the classroom that are going to allow you to easily hear and see your students. You've already been assigned your students, so we'll be able to take just a minute to get ourselves settled before Bill actually begins. We want to make sure that our focus is on the students' responses and not on the teacher. And we want to refrain from interacting with the students, the teacher, or other team members during the research lesson. Really difficult to do, I know, when a student turns and asks for something to not respond to them at all, but let's do our best with that. And we'll discuss all the data and interpretation of the data during the debrief session. So when the lesson is completed, we'll come on back and kind of keep our thoughts internalized. We'll let Bill, being our superstar for the day, jot down any thoughts that he has first. We'll look at our data, kind of collect our data together, and give Bill the opportunity to speak first, since he is our teacher for the day, and we'll honor him in that way. And we'll also make sure that, for the most part, I will take care of making sure if the phone rings that it's answered and that the room is secure, so we can focus in and the students can focus in on the lesson and have as few distractions as possible. All right, let's head on up.